Okay, I got lucky and I got to do another one of these the following week rather than we're having to wait 2 weeks like I've been having to do lately with everything that's going on in my personal life outside of this channel and what I do here. So this is another episode of Quackaholics Anonymous for June the 14th, 2025. If you need to take a break from all that's happening in the world right now with military parades and protests and the war between Israel and Iran and Ukraine and Russia and all the other crazy things going on, you can tune in for this particular episode where I'm going to be trying to talk about both science, spiritual, narcissism, and a whole bunch of other things. And if these notes, as scatterbrained as they are, that I have in front of me here make any kind of coherent sense to me, I might be able to pull this video off. I don't know for sure or not. But before I get started, I do want to give a shout out to the other content creators out here like Sobriety, Bestie, Burn the Stigma, the Recovery Rebellion podcast that she's also got going on, the podcast with Emma, which is Groupthink, oh my God, I just forgot. I lost my train of thought. I should have wrote it down. Thrive Alcohol Recovery for more information about the Sinclair method. And if I haven't mentioned you in this video, maybe I'll have you in one of the links in the video description down below. That's what I get for not writing down all the content creators with my notes that are in front of me. I had a momentary lapse of reason. To Pink Floyd fans might recognize what I just did there. The first thing I want to do in getting into the topic for this week is to start out with outlining a common fallacy that I've been seeing, or at least not so much a common fallacy, but more of a non sequitur type of point that I've been getting from time to time in between the people who spam the comment section and in between even certain people who are more friendly towards the content that I put out on here. And I do want to mention before I get started again, because like I said in my last video, if I didn't mention it, it's been happening to me too here lately, that I would type out an actual comment to a video where I would actually have sources and links and everything else. Something that it was not like a quick drive-by comment where I had something I really wanted to put out is in terms of dispelling some myth about alcohol being a disease or something like that. And I would get done typing a comment and I would hit post and it would appear and then it would just vanish. And I tried to figure out what it was. I carefully avoided using swear words like I'm wont to do, and I tried not posting links. I tried a few different things, and sometimes comments disappear and sometimes they don't. So if you do leave a comment on this channel and it doesn't appear, I literally have no clue what the fuck is wrong with YouTube right now. But anyway, to get that out of the way, to address a common thing that I see happening sometimes, and like I said, if you want to argue with me, you can argue with me on here, but if you're just going to spam by leaving multiple insults on other people's comments and just insult after insult after insult after insult, I'm not going to deal with you. And I don't think that the people who watch this channel who are active in the comment sections deserve to have all your shitty comments with ugly insults thrown at them. So just keep that in mind before you start, before you decide to spam. You're probably not going to get published. But they're doing this one little non sequitur type thing where, and I believe the phrase is non sequitur for this, where you've got 2 points that don't connect, yet they're drawing a conclusion based on them, where they'll point out, say, a flaw in science, or they'll point out where the scientists have been proven wrong about something, and they'll point out where, let's just say, a scientific theory is on shaky ground, or they'll point out the so-called scientific establishment. And by the way, I might even agree with you on some of these points before you go on the attack and offensive, but just by pointing out, it's almost like, well, if we can point out mistakes or problems or issues within the medical community, within the scientific community, then it makes AA valid, I guess, is the overall point here. Like, there was one guy that was trying to attack evolution, and there was one guy that was saying, well, you see, the problem is what the atheists believe. Well, maybe you should talk to the atheist if you're going to straw man me here, because I don't recall having said some of the allegations he was making there. But before I I go into whatever the bullshit was he was talking about, the one thing I think that needs to be cleared up is even if you could prove everything scientific wrong, let's say you could prove evolution didn't really happen. Let's say that you could prove that there was no Big Bang. Let's say you could prove, or somehow, I don't know if prove would be, but let's just say you could do something that would overturn those theories, might be the better way to word that. Let's say you could contribute something to the field of science, or whatever it is, that would kind of hint that maybe what we thought we knew about evolution was wrong, or what we knew about the Big Bang was wrong, or what we knew about quantum mechanics, which I don't understand quantum mechanics, and I'm not going to pretend to, might hint at some kind of creative intelligence behind all of this. Even if you could somehow manage to do those things, even if you could somehow try to show me how the double slit experiment proves that particles are conscious and misbehave, which I don't want to get into a long discussion about why that's not what the double slit experiment actually does. Even if you could do all of that, it still doesn't change the fact that AA is toxic. It doesn't change the fact that AA has a very toxic culture of silence. It doesn't change the fact that AA is a cult religion, and it doesn't prove Bill W.'s bullshit book as being correct. Okay, even if you could do all those things that I just laid out, even if that could be accomplished in some kind of way, and I'm not saying it can't be, I mean, by saying even if it could be, I'm saying even if that could happen, it still wouldn't necessarily make Bill W.'s claim about a spiritual disease that requires a made-up higher power that interferes in your life to be a fact. You know, as far as scientific theory is, as far as it goes, and I don't want to get too sidetracked into science here, but I do want to point out some things before I move forward. Yes, it's true that when the first proposals came up a long time ago about a potential continental drift theory, the scientists who came up with that idea, his name just eluded me, even though I had it in my head when I started recording. It's true, he was laughed at. He was made fun of. They said, this is idiocy, this is lunacy, this is all this other kind of thing. This is just dumb. And now with our observations of tectonic plates that shift and change over time, it's actually gained some kind of credence over it. Still doesn't prove Bill W. is right. Still doesn't prove that the AA cult religion is not founded on lies and dishonesty and routinely covers up for all of its failures and mistakes. And the one thing I want to clear up about the misconception of science, because I'm not a science geek. You know, I'm not one of these people that spends all the afternoon on his days off watching these YouTube physicists talk about quasars and pulsars and dark matter and black holes and all those other kind of things. I'm not a science geek, but I know enough about science to know that science is not some unified group of people in an institution that all blindly agree with one another on everything and all mutually pat each other on the back and congratulate each other on how smart they are and how much better they are than the rest of us. Scientists are almost always in conflict with one another, arguing with one another, disagreeing with one another, going at it with one another. And yes, it is true, there's valid concerns about who funds certain scientific institutions, and it's true there are valid concerns about how scientists may arrive at some of their conclusions, but this idea that there's this institution somewhere, this building that looks like the Umbrella Corporation in the Residential Evil movies, or Resident Evil, not Residential Evil. Well, maybe we should make a movie called Residential Evil. The zombies are in your house, they're not out there in the world. Might make for a good psych thriller. But the idea that they're in some big building like the Umbrella Corporation and they're all publishing papers that all agree with one another and they're all clapping themselves on the back and saying, God damn, we're just so much smarter than all these stupid fucking people out here. We're brilliant, man. We're brilliant. We're the best, you know. That's not science. Scientists argue. Scientists disagree. Scientists go at it all the time. Evolutionary biologists, if you want to, you know, if you could get a room full of them together, they would all be arguing within a few seconds. In psychology, there is I forgot what the lady on YouTube, her name is Cass Eris, if you ever want an interesting channel on psychology, when it had to do with memory, there's a single dual type thing involved in memory and how we learn that literally psychologists fight each other over this stuff. They get violently angry at one another over this kind of stuff. She said that she saw A university professor one time in his 50s now, which is close to my age. Hard to believe, because a part of me deep down inside still thinks I'm a 20-something-year-old in the late 90s. But she saw an actual professor walk up to a poster that didn't agree with his pet theory about memory. And she said he flipped the poster off like that and then looked at the lecturer who was up there talking and made a noise like that. I will tell you one little funny little story before we go a little bit further. There was a Facebook group I got involved in one time, and we're talking childish insults. We're talking threats of fisticuffs. We're talking people that were calling each other all kinds of vile, ugly names. We're talking about people that were using unpolitically correct terminology to demean one another in the name of the group. A rich sense of irony that only I think we could all appreciate. The name of the group was Rational Scientific Discussion. Okay, this is Rational Scientific Discussion. And at first I thought, well, these are all got to be trolls, right? This has got to be all geeks, hiding in the basement somewhere that think they're all science experts or something. But I started looking these people up at their profiles, and these are people with PhDs. These are people who work for prestigious universities. These are people who talk about particle waves and all that. I don't even know if that's a term in physics, but these are people that talk about quasars, pulsars, quantum, whatever the fuck it is. These are people that do this for a living, and they were acting like little 5-year-olds talking about how stupid each other was. So, no, the institution of science is not united on anything. And before I go any further, I often get the accusation on here that I must be one of those, what I call reactive dismissal type of skeptics who, the minute I hear about anything that even remotely hints at something otherworldly, that I must be one of those guys that jumps on the bandwagon and stands up and says, you're full of shit, you're delusional, you've been disproven, no, you're full of shit, there is no such thing as this, there is no deja vu, there is no pets knowing when their owners come home, there's none, it's all bullshit, it's all debunked, and it's all fake. That's actually not the way that I feel healthy skepticism should work, actually. I actually feel that healthy skepticism should be able to entertain the possibilities of pretty much anything. And guess what? It still doesn't change the fact that AA is a sick, malignant, toxic fucking cult. It doesn't change that. There is a debate. I might even post I will. I'll post a link in the video description underneath the other content creators if you want to look at it. And I know there's going to be a little controversy around the names, but there is an actual scientist named Rupert Sheldrake. I don't agree with everything he says because, yes, if you go to Rupert Sheldrake's channel, there is talk about manifestation and consciousness and thoughts that can be outside the brain and all that other, kind of thing that I don't really hold a lot of weight with it, just to be perfectly honest. But I am going to say in his defense that Sheldrake is interesting. He is an educated man. He's not one of these guys on YouTube saying, buy this healing crystal, and this healing crystal will emit waves that will cure all of your migraines and sinus headaches and allergies because the ancient people of long ago knew that if you looked in a pyramid up at the crystal that you would transcend reality. No, he's not one of those. He's not a crackpot. He's actually pretty educated, but he's debating the head of one of the skeptic magazines, Michael Shermer, and he believes there's kind of an intolerance in the scientific community, or at least a strong paradigm that doesn't entertain the idea that maybe there is more to the material world than what people like myself who do lean towards the more material world view that say, I haven't seen any good evidence that there's anything outside of the brain but the brain, versus Michael Shermer, who rightly does point out at one point that science is not unified about these things, right? That you have people, and these are his words, not mine. You have people in the scientific community who are educated, who are experts, who are all this kind of thing, that hold controversial views about the Big Bang not being the actual way the universe was formed, that say the universe is not expanding, that talk about an electric universe, that talk about a few other things. You have people in the scientific community that don't agree with the current consensus about, say, man-made climate change or actual climate change. You have those out there. And it's important, he says, to note that these kinds of experts who say, I disagree with, say, the consensus on climate change, right? I disagree with the consensus on the Big Bang, or I disagree with this idea about. These are not what he said, guys with tinfoil hats on that are watching YouTube videos and saying, I'm an expert about the entire thing. I know more than this. These are not those kinds of dudes. These are actually educated people who work in these fields who, they're not just pulling shit out of thin air from some conspiracy theory website. But his point as a skeptic is none of these ideas have really ever been able to produce, let's just say, enough evidence to gain traction. But there's always the chance they could. Whereas Rupert Sheldrake, and he's not arguing about big bangs and climate or anything like that. Rupert Sheldrake is just saying there's more of a materialistic bias in the scientific community that does not entertain the notion that there are things like the possibility of, say, pets knowing when their owners come home. That there have been too many people, because he said a lot of people accuse me of making extraordinary claims, and I'm really not investigating extraordinary claims. I mean, investigating very simple things that everyday ordinary people have all probably experienced at one point or the other, like when you feel like someone's watching you and you turn around and someone's watching you. And he says, and by the way, when I investigate this, I also rule out, or I try to rule these things out by rational explanations. I don't just jump to the supernatural. Like, I felt like someone was watching me, I turned around, there was someone watching me. Well, I could have turned my head around 30 or 40 times when I felt like someone was watching me and they weren't watching me, which would indicate that that was just a sampling bias on my part. You know what? I forgot about the number of times I felt like someone was watching me and turned my head and there was nobody there. I forgot about that, but I remembered the one time that I thought someone was watching me and I turned my head around and they were there. He said, I take all that into consideration when I do my scientific research. It's an interesting enough discussion that I think it warrants putting it in the video description for those who are curious about this sort of thing. But there is still this issue at hand that needs to be addressed with these people that are trying to, well, science can't explain this one mystery. Therefore, Bill W.'s cult religion is correct. Well, we've only explored but a tiny percentage of the planet's oceans. Therefore, Bill W.'s cult religion is correct. We've only seen this much of the universe. There's no way we'll, it is true in a universe as vast as ours, it's pretty unreasonable to think that human minds could comprehend everything there is out there, even begin to understand all of it. Just because that's the case does not automatically equate to, therefore Bill W.'s God is correct. Therefore the AA program is correct. Therefore this particular religion or this particular holy text is correct. It's an automatic leap you're making when you say, well, you know what? There's mysteries in the universe that we don't understand. Therefore AA is true. And, as far as also on scientific consensus, like Michael Shermer pointed out, there are people that don't believe that there is dark matter. There are people that don't believe there are black holes. There are actual scientists. In fact, Rupert Sheldrake even kind of countered the point in the debate and said, we don't have any evidence for dark matter and black holes, really, not in the way that people think. If you watch science fiction or you watch some hyped up thing on YouTube, oh, there's a black hole and it's an alien or something like that. Or the guy with the standing up hair on the History Channel, black holes, aliens. Aliens, definitely aliens, kind of thing. The point that I'm making with all of this is, no, I don't pretend to be someone who understands all the mysteries of the universe. I don't pretend to be some hardcore materialist that says there's absolutely no way that there's anything out there extraordinary that couldn't be rationally explained. For one thing, I couldn't possibly hope to investigate every extraordinary claim. Okay, and there's no, even if I did nothing but do that every day, all day long, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, I still wouldn't be able to do that, and I wouldn't want to. For one thing, there are bills that need to be paid, and I do have a life of my own where I do things that are purely for enjoyment, but I wouldn't actually make that claim. But even overall, even this, with all these mysteries that we don't understand, with all these things that we really don't know about, even on top of all of that, there's still zero evidence for Bill W.'s cult religion being accurate. And with a long-winded talk like that, I gotta have the vape. Gotta have two vapes. It must be the phenomenon of craving that's kicking in. So, there is something that needs to be addressed, though, when it comes to this idea of the universe is strange, the universe is mysterious, the universe has these things that we can't measure. It's weird. You know, I mean, that's literally what the argument is with a lot of people I've encountered online. Not the hardcore religious types, but quantum mechanics is weird, therefore magic. Line of reasoning. But is that really what's going on in AA? Because I hear people all the time, and, you know, they'll talk about having an open mind. They'll talk about, you know, spiritual this and spiritual that. And there is a thing, and now it's time for my notes, if you haven't got bored to death with the first half of that video. Is that really what's going on in AA? Is AA pondering the mysteries of the universe? Is AA really saying there's a ill-defined spirit of the universe that guides us all? Which, by the way, even if you could prove that there is something mysterious about the universe, you still have to prove that it's guiding us, that it's removing our obsession to drink, and all these other things. But to me, that's not what's going on in AA. There's no open-mindedness about mystery in AA. It's all solved in AA. Bill W. thinks he got the correct version of how spirituality should be. And it's one of the reasons I've grown to hate the word spirituality, because it seems like the recovery community has hijacked it and got a corner market on it. And there is so much spiritual narcissism, and it's not my term, I'm making it up, and I'm not diagnosing people because I don't have a fucking PhD, that permeates the so-called spiritual community. And so, like, if you want to really examine some of the shit that comes forth in AA, I got to go to my notes here. If you're sober today in AA, it's not because, wow, it's a mystery we can't all figure out. We can't possibly hope to solve this mystery, which is no fucking mystery because I do it every day without a God, without prayer, without steps or anything else. But if you're sober in AA, it's by the grace of God. It's not because things are strange. And if you're not, well, maybe God didn't choose you in AA, because AA doesn't really say this directly, but its culture implies it constantly. We're the lucky ones. We're the chosen ones. We've got the universe all figured out, even though it's the spirit of the universe. And we're the spiritually superior ones. Now, of course, this is when the AA tap dancers come in and say, just because there's some people in the meeting saying stuff like that doesn't mean it's AA, the book, yeah. I've heard it all. You know, that's another thing. Most AA cult members never come up with something original when they're attacking me. They either demean my appearance, they either make fun of me, or they do the whole, you must have a resentment, or telling the truth is killing people, or they do the, Bill Wilson was guided by God, you know, and all this, it saved millions of people. They don't ever seem to have anything original. After this many years of doing this, I can't remember if it's 9 or 10 now, you would think they could come up with something original to come at me with once in a while. But take page 123. No, not 123. I fucked up my own notes. What does it say in the big book right there in the very beginning? One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way. Did anybody ever think about the fact that, and it comes after the line, there's a vast amount of fun about all of this. This line in of itself, even if I just throw out there's a vast amount of fun in it, this line is cold, this line is dismissive, and this line subtly blames the person for not submitting to AA's path. There's no reflection, there's no compassion, there's no, we were devastated when this happened, there was not, we felt like we failed him and had some survivor's guilt. There's no anything along that line. There's just, he could not see our way. He just didn't get it. Right? And there on, at the end of the big book, where it says, abandon yourself to God. May join us. May God bless you and keep you happy until then. This implies that if you don't join us, you're on your own. No grace, no blessing, none of that. Join us and good luck, I guess. Because apparently, grace is for only those who join us and who do steps over and over again and who sit in meetings and who constantly kiss up to the old-timer hierarchy and who constantly think that the higher power spirit of the universe, which nobody knows what it really is, because the universe is a mystery, gets them parking spaces. You know, this toxic positivity, too, permeates a whole lot of, not just in AA, but it also in anything remotely spiritual here that I've noticed. In fact, there's entire videos about this type of toxic positivity. You're supposed to just paste a smile over pain or over grief. Sadness is a spiritual failure, and it permeates in AA. When your best friend dies and you're told it's a part of God's plan, in AA, pain isn't processed. There's no process. There's no numerous emotions that you feel when you're grieving someone that you go through or anything like that, like in the real world, like what real human beings do. In AA, it's packaged and rebranded and sold back to you as some kind of spiritual growth. Some have to die so that others can live. Well, that poor bastard over there drank himself to death. Not everybody gets the program. You know, there was one bastard I had from a sponsor when I was living in his garage, and I've talked about that piece of shit a lot in my earlier videos, but he would get this arrogant fucking look in his face. He'd say, not all of us make it. No, you think you're the one who's going to make it. You just don't give a fuck about anybody else. God gave you the special badge, the secret key to the fucking universe. Fuck everybody else. Even though it seemed more like he was there to just find victims to exploit, honestly. If someone relapses and dies in AA, it's not because there's pain and there's tragedy and there's sorrow and there's unfortunate circumstances in the world. No, their death is a lesson for everyone else. You're not supposed to mourn. You're not supposed to feel sadness or grief because, after all, get off your pity pot. Get off that pity pot and man up and do the steps and stop being a victim and all that other bullshit. You're supposed to be grateful that it's not you who drank yourself to death. But I thought our higher power could be whatever we wanted to. I thought we were just spiritual beings, you know, having a human experience, which is an idiotic thing to say in of itself. Do you think all those people who are subject to what's going on in Israel and Iran or in Palestine or in the Ukraine or in Russia, do you think they're just spiritual beings and having the unfortunate human experience of getting their arm blown off and maybe seeing their children get killed? It's full of, the whole AA message underlying is very much definitely not this spiritual journey. It's a thing of so-called spiritual lottery winners. You didn't get sober because of support. You didn't get sober because of medication. You didn't get sober because you just happen to have the right circumstances. Like myself, for example, I've talked before about the toxic environments I've lived in the past, and I don't know how my life would have turned out if I hadn't been fortunate enough to get the fuck away from those people. Circumstances. No, it was because God picked you. It was because you did the work. It was because you were willing. But so please tell me how my hardcore, ugly, materialistic view of the world, where I don't accept mystery or anything like that, how this AA worldview fits with that. Because the AA worldview to me doesn't fit as some kind of spiritual open-mindedness. It fits as some kind of spiritual intolerance, this toxic spiritual intolerance. And if God doesn't pick the person who dies, well, they just didn't want it bad enough. They blame the dead in AA for dying. They elevate the survivors as spiritually superior. I've been sober for 25 years, and it's all because of God and the program and the fellowship and all this other thing. Let's forget about all the ones it doesn't work for, because those poor bastards just didn't want it any bad enough. They weren't open-minded. They weren't spiritual. They couldn't get honest, you know. And of course, it's not really recovery here. That's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with what I would call a hierarchy of holiness, you know. If you're sober, you must be closer to God. If you're not, you must have just failed spiritually, or you couldn't be honest. AA members will tell you, well, you know, or the ones who spam my channel with this bullshit about, well, there's more to life than just science. Science can't make you happy and all this other thing. I never said it did. Nice straw man there. But this is not some kind of bizarre universal spirituality we're talking about here. The Big Book speaks of God as one who listens, judges, protects, punishes. That's not the universe, right? When they talk about the spirit of the universe. Now, what you're talking about is a cosmic parent. A cosmic parent that's an abusive cosmic parent who picks his favorites, who do the steps, who picks the one who did the best fifth step to survive and says to this guy over here, I don't know, I just don't like you. You just don't seem like you want it bad enough. Have a fucking bottle of vodka and end it already, because you have to die so that other people can live, right? This isn't just misguided. It really does fit into that broad category of spiritual narcissism that I see on the internet talked about. This is turning sobriety into a status symbol. It turns grief and pain into a test of fate. It turns any pain that's happening into your life, whether it's a tragic loss of a loved one, or whether it's someone who relapses in an AA meeting, or whether it's just bad luck. Things happen to people in this world unjustly. People are stricken with horrible conditions through no fault of their own. People lose their jobs and their careers just like that, over some unfortunate circumstance. And yet, somehow or the other, AA turns this into some moral caste system, where the sober people are blessed and the struggling people, they're spiritually defective. Remember last week's video? We're makers of our own misery. God didn't do it. And it shuts down any empathy or compassion, which is supposed to be like this cornerstone of what most people, when they're tossing this word around, spiritual is. There's no empathy and compassion here. How can you mourn somebody's death, or how can you mourn tragedy if you're turning it into a cautionary tale of survival? Like if you say to someone, this guy drank himself to death, he had to do that so I could get the blessings of the mystical power of the universe. The mystical power of the universe all around me, Not my fault he couldn't get it. He's going to probably die any fucking way. No empathy or compassion there, right? If you survived these escapades, and I'm glancing down at my notes here, it must be because you're more in tune with the spirit of the universe. You're more in tune with God, Or as some will smugly suggest, you did the work. They're always talking about the work, It's this theology of personal glory. It's all dressed up in recovery slogans. Holy shit, I actually wrote that down. Sometimes I amaze me even. But spiritual narcissism, and I'm reading more from my notes here, which is what I think this is an underlying current of that. It's not spiritual, it's spiritual narcissism. There is no going out into the field and looking up in the skies, or looking at some Richard Attenborough documentary, looking at the vastness of this universe or the wonders of this planet, or doing like, oh my God, the guy's name escapes me now, the one who wondered if he dreamed he was a butterfly, or it was a butterfly that dreamed he was a man, or was he a man dreaming of a butterfly who just more or less said, accept everything. Go with the flow, go with the way. It's Taoism, but I can't think of the guy's name. This is not what's going on here. What's going on here is this superiority masked by this phony fucking humility, right? It shows up as people proclaiming, by the grace of God, I'm sober today. There's nothing humble about that, actually. Sobriety is some sort of divine endorsement. It's something you got from the universe. The universe blessed you with sobriety. Yes, you, the worthless drunk with 50 DUIs and multiple felony convictions who lived homeless in a storm drain while he was stealing money, but he was also a major drug dealer at the same time. Some of these AA people need to get their story straight when they're trying to turn themselves into miracles. This isn't really gratitude either. They'll say this is, you need to get an attitude of gratitude in AA. This is not an attitude of gratitude. This is boasting. God picked me. He didn't pick them. He picked me. It's dangerous, I think, because it allows these people to feel somehow spiritually elite while they sit in meetings and claim that they're humble. And what does this have to do with science being wrong, like so many people come at me with on this channel? What does this have to do with there's a lot of mystery in the universe? What does this have to do with the quantum mechanic bullshit? None. You combine this with this idea that suffering is some kind of divine lesson, and you get this culture where questioning pain is taboo, where feeling feelings is against the law, where if you do feel sorry for yourself, or you do feel down, or you do feel depressed, it's because you're not spiritually fit. You're not doing what the book tells you to do. All the trademarks of a cult, by the way, where all the negative emotions are your fault, and all the positive, glowy, starry-eyed emotions where you just don't give a fuck about anybody, because who gives a shit if everybody else dies? I'm happy over here doing my fist stepping in my meeting. It's a trademark of a cult. Grief is spiritual weakness. Death of a fellow member is because they didn't thoroughly follow our path. And I still got more notes here. I'm getting close to the end here. But I'm pointing out that the people who come at me with this, there's weird shit in the universe, so you can't claim that it's all material. You can't claim that it's not God. They don't seem to understand that in no way does that prove that this bullshit toxic cult is correct. Okay? And that kind of mindset doesn't really heal. It just protects your sense of superiority. You're right. You're not really learning how to process emotions. You're not learning how to cope with life. You're not learning how to handle life on life's terms like they're talking about. No, you're just sitting there thinking, those guys got drunk and died last night, but you know what? I'm still here. I'm Elton John. I'm still standing. Give me the cane and the hat and let me do a little tap dance with it. And this kind of comes, all of it. Bill W.'s idea or his design, like somebody who tried to say, well, see, this thing is only for alcoholics, and if you're not an alcoholic, you won't get it, which is a crock of bullshit, a load of bullshit. And let's be clear, he stole all this from the Oxford group, and the Oxford group did not believe in a God of your understanding. Their God had very specific expectations, just like the Big Book. Once you get past the soft-focused slogans, it tells you exactly what your spiritual condition should look like. And if you don't line up your suffering, it's practically a foregone conclusion, thy will not mine be done, and all that other kind of thing about get right with God, and our will must line up with God's will, proper use of the will, the improper use of the will, right. AA loves to say you can have a God of your own understanding, and it sounds really inclusive when they throw that bullshit at you. But let's not get too creative, because if your God doesn't behave exactly like the one in the Big Book, the one who listens, the one who intervenes, the one who blesses people with sobriety who honestly seek him. They always got the little caveat, well, you didn't honestly seek him, that's why you're fucking drunk, The one who keeps score, the one who rewards you, the one who punishes you, the one who just happens to make all your amendments come into your life the moment that you need to make those 8th and 9th steps amends, and blow your own fucking trumpet about what a humble, wonderful person you are. If someone came up to me to do a 9-step amendment like it says in that book, hey, I've got religion, I never apologize for depending upon my creator, but if I don't do this amendment, I will drink again. I'd be like, get the fuck out of here, but your understanding of God, if it doesn't act like that, it's wrong. We know what they'll do. They'll tell you that, try telling your sponsor that your higher power is just this metaphor. Try telling your sponsor that it's just a personal deity that floats in the universe somewhere. And he's going to look at you with judgment. He's going to say, well, did that keep you sober? Because I know people like that and they're all dead now. They all drank themselves to death. And they'll probably tell you you're resisting the program. They'll probably tell you you're in denial. They'll probably just tell you you're running on self-will. Lots of people think they're too smart for this program. There's nobody too stupid. There's a whole lot of people who are way too smart, Your God is invalid if it feels like that way, because it doesn't match Bill W.'s God, the one who apparently does PR for selective grace by letting 30-year-old timers sit there and smugly talk about how much better they are than everybody else and wait for people to kiss their asses and divine tough love. So the whole point that I was getting at before I get to my subscriber comment is that if you come to my channel to tell me science can't explain everything, there's been out-of-body experiences that they cannot explain, there's this, there's that, it has nothing to do with the cult religion of Quackaholics Anonymous. Quackaholics Anonymous is still toxic, it's still bad for human emotions, it's still bad for quitting drinking, it's terrible as an organization, and it shields toxic members who, when Carla Brader was killed, the only thing they could say on the comments for another 48 hours was how you can't blame AA. I didn't see one person say, this is terrible. This is tragic. There is a problem in AA, and we need to talk about this. They didn't do any of that. They were just, you people can't blame AA. You blame AA just because you couldn't get sober. You just have a resentment. Typical cult line, not an original thought in their fucking heads about that. And it's terrible. It's just a terrible tragedy. So let's get to the subscriber comment to wrap this week up. And this is from a subscriber who says, I spent 15 years in the rooms, and I had one slip. They didn't have a chance to humiliate me, but I have seen it. one guy chairing the meeting was coming back and shared that he had like 7 days sober, and went on to share some of the pain he was in. And at that moment, when he was done, some asshole old-timer, this old man, put his hand on his chin and asked the poor guy, "What made you think you could drink?" I've been told that too, because I was a chronic relapser as well. Then another old-timer, this was a woman, said to the old-timer, "What are you doing? Are you cross-talking?" To which the old-timer replied, "It's my share. I can say whatever I want." I remember one old-timer, when he got interrupted for cross-talking, that was my sponsor, he said, "You can't cut off God from talking." Well, you can't cut off God from talking. Are you saying you're God, or are you saying God's speaking through you? I think it was saying God was speaking through you. You know, for a group of people that say we of agnostic temperance were very arrogant, there's nothing more fucking arrogant than thinking God has chosen you to talk through, even though the higher power can just be the mystical thing in the universe, right? The whole thing turned into an ugly, loud argument between the two, which another old-timer had to break up. It was very, very surreal. It's all very toxic, sick, and unsafe for the suffering who's really looking for help. I felt so sorry for the chairperson who was clearly in pain. By the way, these two old-timers, one had 49 years sober, the other had 33. Of course, this is their count. Oh, and the old-timer woman happened to be my sponsor. I was so embarrassed. There are so many real reasons why I left AA, and if the mind fucking is not enough, and you truly are having a nice time in life and dare share that in a meeting, they will find a way to dump a heavy load of their own shit on you and will knock you off that so-called stupid pink cloud that they talk about. By the time you leave the meeting, you will feel as miserable as they all do. There's no pleasing the program. And you know, that is another thing, this whole idea of people getting better in AA. Try going in AA and saying, "I'm having a good time. You know what? I am so much happier now that I'm not drinking. I'm feeling so much better now that I'm not drinking." They will all launch into you. And it's funny, because since leaving AA, I'm actually honestly happy to not be drinking. Go to an AA meeting and say you're happy to not be drinking and watch. I was in an AA meeting one time when a new guy who had like 60 days, he said, "I'm feeling so much better. My health is a lot better. I'm not having near the problems that I had when I was staying drunk every day." And the very first old-timer after him, he said, "Well, I was in my 5th year of sobriety, and I had a loaded pistol to my head." And of course, every fucking asshole afterward had to chime in. And attraction, not promotion. Yeah. I really want to be like a guy who quits drinking for 5 years and wants to blow his fucking brains out. I'd rather, you know, that really makes me want what you assholes have out there. And okay, I think that's enough for this week.